The dust motes danced in the afternoon sun, a silent, swirling ballet in the bars of light slanting through the living room window. It was the kind of lazy Tuesday that felt like a gift, a pocket of stillness in the otherwise bustling symphony of our lives. Liam was at the office, wrestling with blueprints for a new city library. Maya, our fiercely independent 15-year-old, was at soccer practice, and 10-year-old Josh was at a friend's house, no doubt deeply immersed in the world of video game warfare. The house was mine. I'd always found a deep, satisfying peace in these quiet hours. My work as a freelance art restorer had trained me to appreciate solitude, to find companionship in the patient unfolding of time. Today, my project was personal. A spring cleaning whim had morphed into a full-blown redecorating mission. I was tired of the same muted earth tones we'd chosen a decade ago. I wanted color, vibrancy, a reflection of the happy, comfortable life we'd built within these walls. My attention landed on the gallery wall climbing the staircase. It was a mosaic of our history, awkward early dating photos, our wedding day, a swaddled newborn Maya, a gap-toothed Josh on his first day of school. At the very top, in a place of honor, was my favorite. It was a photo from our first anniversary trip to a small coastal town in Maine. We were young, windswept, and incandescently happy. Liam's arm was wrapped tightly around my waist, his head thrown back in laughter, and I was looking at him with an expression of such pure, unadulterated adoration it almost made me blush to see it now, 16 years later. The frame was a simple, dark mahogany, a gift from Liam's parents, the Vances, for our first Christmas as a married couple. It had always felt solid, dependable, much like the man in the picture. But as I reached up to take it down, I noticed the top corner had begun to separate slightly. The miter joint had loosened over the years, a minor casualty of time and changing humidity. "Well, you need a little TLC, don't you?" I murmured to the frame, carrying it carefully to the large oak table in the dining room that served as my workspace. I laid it face down on a soft cloth. The back was sealed with a sheet of brown paper held in place by a series of small metal tabs. As a restorer, I was methodical. I gently pried up each tab with the tip of a palette knife, my movements precise and practiced. The backing board lifted away easily. I expected to see the back of the photograph, maybe a date scrawled in Liam's familiar architectural script. Instead, something else was there. Tucked between the photograph and the backing board was a single sheet of paper folded into a tight, flat square. It was yellowed with age, the creases sharp and definite, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times before being laid to rest in this wooden tomb. My first thought was that it was a note from his parents, a sweet sentiment tucked in with their gift. A small, secret blessing for our marriage. A smile touched my lips as I carefully unfolded it. The paper was brittle, and a corner flaked away under my thumb. The handwriting was not the familiar, looping script of Liam's mother, Eleanor, nor the spiky, hurried writing of his father, Robert. This was a feminine hand, elegant and controlled, but with a slight tremor that suggested immense emotion had been poured into the ink. The ink itself had faded from black to a soft, watery brown. It was a letter. And it was addressed to my husband. "My dearest Liam." The words were a gentle caress, and I felt a pang of something not jealousy, but a tender curiosity. An old girlfriend, perhaps? A secret admirer from his university days? Liam had always been handsome, with his kind, gray eyes and a quiet confidence that drew people in. I continued reading, my smile still lingering. "I visit your stone every Sunday. I bring the white roses you always loved, the ones you tried to grow in that little patch of dirt behind the dormitory. They never took, do you remember? You had a brilliant mind for physics, my love, but a black thumb for flowers. I talk to you for a while. I tell you about my week, about the leaking faucet Robert still hasn't fixed, about the neighbor's cat who keeps sleeping on our porch swing. I tell you how much I miss the sound of your laughter." My smile vanished. My blood went cold. "Stone?" I read the line again. "I visit your stone every Sunday." A stone. A headstone. The room, once so warm and peaceful, suddenly felt cavernous and cold. The silent dust motes now seemed like ash. My heart began a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird beating its wings. This had to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. Maybe stone was a metaphor, a private name for a place they used to meet. It had to be. I forced my eyes back to the page, my hand trembling so violently the elegant script seemed to shiver. "I know you can't hear me. The doctors explained it all, the finality of it. But it is a comfort, this ritual. It is the only way I can feel close to you since the fire. The fire. The words leaped off the page and seared themselves into my brain. Liam had a scar, a small, silvery patch of skin on his left forearm. When I'd asked about it years ago, he'd been vague. A stupid cooking accident in college, he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Me in a pan of burning oil. Very dramatic. Not very interesting. He'd changed the subject so smoothly I'd never thought to question it. But this letter didn't talk about a cooking accident. It talked about a fire. A fire and a headstone. My breath hitched in my throat. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. This was wrong. This was a nightmare, a piece of fiction that had somehow found its way into the heart of my reality. Liam was alive. He was at work. He would be home at 6:30, kiss me, ask about my day, and help Josh with his math homework. He was not a ghost whose mother left roses at his grave. My mind raced, desperately trying to construct a logical explanation. Maybe this letter was for another Liam. A Liam Vance who died in a fire. And his mother, in a fit of grief, had somehow mistaken my Liam for her son? No, that was insane. The letter was in a frame given to us by his parents. There was no mistake. With a sense of dread so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my chest, I read the final, devastating paragraph. Sometimes, I let myself hate him. The other boy. Daniel. The one who walked out of the smoke and flames when you did not. The one who took your wallet, your future, your name. I know the police said it was an accident, that he was a hero who tried to pull you out. But I saw him at the memorial service. He had your scholarship papers in his hand and a haunted look in his eyes. He looks enough like you to be a cousin. Close enough, I suppose. I don't know why he did it. Maybe he was just a scared kid running from a life he didn't want. But he let my son die and then he became him. He stole you from me, Liam. And now I hear he has a wife. Family. He is living the life that should have been yours. I pray for her. I pray she never has to learn that the man she loves is a ghost, a story built on the ashes of my son. Forever your loving mother, Eleanor Vance. The letter slipped from my fingers and drifted to the floor. Daniel. The name was alien. A sharp, ugly sound. It didn't belong in my house and my life. My husband's name was Liam. Liam James Vance. I had married him. I had his children. I had loved him for 16 years. I stumbled back from the table, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a sob. I looked around the room, but I wasn't seeing it anymore. I was seeing 16 years of lies. Every memory, every shared moment was suddenly tainted, curdling in my mind. Our first date. He told me about his childhood in a quiet suburb of Chicago. He described his parents, Robert, the stoic history professor, and Eleanor, the gentle-hearted librarian. Was any of it true? Or was he reciting a biography he had memorized? The biography of a dead man. His nightmares. In the early years of our marriage, he used to have terrible nightmares. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, but he would never tell me what they were about. Just stress, he'd mumble, pulling me close. Too much work. Now I saw them for what they were. Not dreams, but memories. The smoke, the flames, the boy he left behind. His relationship with his parents. It had always been polite. Distant. I chalked it up to Robert's reserved nature. But now I recalled the constant underlying sadness in Eleanor's eyes whenever she looked at him. I had thought it was just her melancholy personality. I was a fool. It wasn't melancholy. It was grief. She wasn't looking at her son. She was looking at his imposter. The living effigy of her greatest loss. Why had they gone along with it? The letter provided a clue. I hear he has a wife. A family. Had they kept silent for my sake? For Maya and Josh? The thought of their quiet, decades-long sacrifice was another knife in my heart. They had protected a lie to protect us. I sank into a chair, my body trembling uncontrollably. The foundation of my world had just been obliterated. The man I had built my life with, the father of my children, was a complete stranger. A fraud. A man named Daniel who had stolen a dead boy's life. He let my son die and then he became him. Was he a monster? A cold, calculating sociopath? Or was he what Eleanor's letter speculated, a scared kid who made a single, terrible, life-altering decision in a moment of panic and trauma? Did it matter? The love I felt for him, a love that had been the bedrock of my existence, was now hopelessly entangled with a sense of utter betrayal. It was a violation so profound I couldn't even process it. Who was the man I kissed goodbye this morning? Who was the man who held my hand while I was in labor with our daughter? Was any of his love for me real, or was that part of the performance, too? I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He had made me a party to his deception without my consent. He had built our family on a graveyard. Our children, Maya and Josh, were the children of a lie. Their last name, Vance, was a stolen inheritance. I had to know for sure. The letter was horrifying, but it was still just a letter. I needed proof. Tangible, undeniable proof. My mind, sharpened by years of looking for the hidden truths beneath layers of paint and varnish, kicked into gear. My panic receded, replaced by a cold, clinical focus. I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and slipped it into the pocket of my jeans. Then I walked into Liam S. Daniel's study. The room was his sanctuary. Books on architectural theory lined the walls. Rolled-up blueprints stood in tall wicker baskets. His desk was neat, a testament to his orderly mind. I went straight to the computer. My hands were steady now. I opened a search engine. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What was I even looking for? I typed the words from the letter. Liam Vance, Fire, University. The results were instantaneous. A handful of links appeared, most of them irrelevant. But the fourth one down made my breath catch. It was a link to a digitized newspaper archive. The headline read, Tragic Dormitory Fire Claims Life of Promising Physics Student. The article was from a small, local paper dated 21 years ago. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked the link. The page loaded a grainy scan of an old newspaper. A devastating fire swept through the Oakwood Hall dormitory at Northgate University early this morning, claiming the life of one student, Liam James Vance, 20, and injuring another. Vance, a sophomore physics major and recipient of the prestigious Harrington Scholarship, was pronounced dead at the scene. I read on, my eyes scanning the text voraciously. His roommate, Daniel Coleman, 19, was treated for minor burns and smoke inhalation. A visibly shaken Coleman told reporters he was awakened by the smoke alarm and tried to rouse Vance, but was beaten back by the intense heat and flames. I tried. Coleman was quoted as saying, his voice choked with emotion. I really tried to get him out. Fire officials have ruled the cause of the blaze to be faulty wiring in an old space heater. Daniel Coleman. There it was. The name from the letter. My husband's real name. But the final, soul-destroying blow was the picture accompanying the article. There were two small, black and white headshots. On the left was Liam Vance, deceased. He had the same kind eyes, the same strong jawline. He looked so much like my Liam. Close enough to be a cousin, Eleanor had written. And on the right was Daniel Coleman, survivor. It was him. It was the face of the man I had married. Younger, his cheeks thinner, his eyes wide with a terror that I now understood was not just from the fire, but from the lie he was about to begin. But it was him, unmistakably. The man I loved. The man who had slept beside me for 16 years. I pushed back from the desk so abruptly the chair screeched against the hardwood floor. I felt like I was going to be sick. The truth was no longer a suspicion whispered from a yellowed piece of paper. It was here in black and white. A documented fact. My husband, Liam Vance, was dead. He had died in a fire 21 years ago. The man who would walk through our front door in a few hours was Daniel Coleman. A liar. A grave robber. An identity thief. I stumbled out of the study and back into the living room. The afternoon sun was lower now, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. The house no longer felt like a home. Felt like a stage set. A lie. Everything in it, furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the wall, the faint scent of Liam's cologne that lingered in the air was part of an elaborate fiction he had constructed. And me? I wasn't his wife. I was his unwitting leading lady, the fool who believed the story. I stood in the center of the room, the hidden letter a toxic weight in my pocket, the newspaper article burning a hole in my mind. The quiet of the house was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb. I heard a car pull into the driveway. My blood turned to ice. It was too early. He wasn't supposed to be home for another hour. The sound of his key in the lock was a gunshot in the silence. The door swung open and there he was. Liam. Daniel. He smiled when he saw me, the familiar, gentle smile that had always made my heart feel safe. "Hey, Elle," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Finished early. Thought I'd surprise you." He walked toward me, his arms open for a hug. I saw the love in his eyes. The love I had cherished, the love I had built my world upon. But now all I could see was the ghost of the boy he'd left to burn. All I could see was the lie. What I read changed everything forever I'd once seen scrawled in a book. I never understood the depth of that sentiment until this moment. My past was a fiction, my present was a fraud, and my future was a terrifying, gaping void. He reached for me, his smile faltering slightly as he saw my expression. "Ilara? What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the stranger wearing my husband's face. And in that moment I knew with chilling certainty that he was right. I had. He stood there, halfway across the living room, his smile dissolving into a mask of concern. "Ilara? Honey, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet." My body was frozen, but my mind was a maelstrom. 1,000 responses screamed through my head. "Who are you? Get out of my house. You're a liar. You're Daniel Coleman." But the words were trapped behind a wall of shock. My throat was tight, my tongue a leaden weight in my mouth. All I could manage was a faint shake of my head. I took an involuntary step backward, and his face, the face I had loved for half my life, fell. He saw the terror in my eyes. He saw the chasm that had just opened between us. "Did something happen?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "Are the kids okay?" The mention of the children was a physical blow. Maya and Josh. Their faces flashed in my mind, Maya with his thoughtful gray eyes, Josh with his easy, charming grin. They were Vances. Or they thought they were. What did this make them? The children of a ghost? The legacy of a thief? "The kids are fine," I managed to whisper. The words were raspy, alien. He took another step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Okay, good. So it's you. Are you sick? Should I call a doctor?" His concern, which hours ago would have been a comfort, was now grotesque. It was part of the act. The performance of the loving husband, a role he had been playing for 2 decades. The sheer audacity of it, the sustained, unbroken commitment to the lie, was breathtaking. I needed to control myself. Not for him, but for me. A hysterical breakdown would give him the advantage. He was a master of deception, he would know how to manage a distraught wife. I needed to be cold. I needed to be clinical. I was an art restorer. I knew how to strip away the layers of varnish and deceit to find the truth underneath. This was just the most important, most horrifying restoration of my life. I held up a hand. Just don't come any closer. The hurt that flashed in his eyes was so genuine, so real, that it almost broke me. For a split second, I saw Liam, my Liam, confused and wounded by my sudden coldness. But then the image of the newspaper article superimposed itself over his face. This wasn't my Liam. This was Daniel Coleman, the survivor. He stopped, his hands falling to his sides. The silence in the room was thick, charged with unspoken questions. He was scanning my face, his architect's mind trying to analyze the stress fractures in my composure, trying to understand what had caused this sudden, catastrophic collapse. "Ilara, you're scaring me," he said softly. "Talk to me. Whatever it is, we can fix it. We always do. The word was a mockery. There was no we. There was him, the liar, and me, the fool. And an entire life built on a foundation of sand and bone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I walked over to the dining room table and picked up the mahogany picture frame, now lying in pieces. I held up the backing board. "I was fixing this. The frame your parents gave us." I watched his face. There was no flicker of recognition, no sign of guilt. Just patient confusion. "A corner came loose," I continued, my voice gaining a brittle strength. "And something fell out." I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the folded, yellowed paper. It felt both hot and cold, a relic of a life that was never lived and a lie that had been lived for far too long. I pulled it out and placed it on the table between us. He stared at the small, fragile square of paper. He didn't move. It was as if he knew instinctively what it was. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, sickly gray. The confident posture he always held, the easy set of his shoulders, seemed to crumble. He looked old. defeated. A man who had been running for 21 years and had just heard the hounds at his heels. "What is that?" he asked, but his voice was hollow. He knew. Of course he knew. He must have wondered about this letter, about what Liam's mother might have done or said. Maybe he had even searched for it. "It's a letter," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "From Eleanor Vance. To her son. Her dead son." The last two words hung in the air, sharp and glittering as shards of glass. He flinched as if I had struck him. He looked from the letter to my face, and in his eyes I saw it. The end of the road. The crumbling of the entire, elaborate architecture of his lie. The terror wasn't of the fire anymore. It was of me. He sank into a nearby chair, his body moving with the slow, heavy movements of a much older man. He stared at the letter, not touching it, as if it were radioactive. "Elara," he began, his voice a choked whisper. "Don't," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Don't you dare say my name. I want you to tell me yours." He looked up, his gray eyes swimming with a desperate, pleading sorrow. "You know my name." "No, I don't," I said, the rage I had been suppressing finally starting to boil over. "I know the name of the man you share a bed with. I know the name of the man who is the father of my children. But I don't know your name. So tell me who you are." He closed his eyes. A single tear tracked its way down his cheek, a path of shame on his pale skin. When he opened them again, the fight was gone. There was only a vast, empty landscape of resignation. "Daniel," he said, the name barely audible. "My name is Daniel Coleman." Hearing him say it, hearing the truth from his own mouth, was a strange, hollow victory. It confirmed everything. It made the nightmare real. "Daniel Coleman," I repeated, tasting the unfamiliar syllables. "And Liam Vance?" "He was my roommate," Daniel whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "He was my best friend." "The boy you left to die in a fire?" The question was cruel, a deliberate twist of the knife, and I saw him recoil. His head snapped up, a spark of defiance, of pain, in his eyes. "I didn't leave him. I tried. God, Elara, I tried to get him out. The smoke was so thick, the fire, it was everywhere. Couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. The last thing I remember is a piece of the ceiling falling." He trailed off, his hand unconsciously going to the silvery scar on his forearm. The scar he'd dismissed as a stupid cooking accident. "And when you woke up?" I prompted, my voice cold and relentless. "What happened then, Daniel?" He told me the story. Not the polished, heroic version he'd given the reporters, but a raw, fragmented confession. He spoke of the chaos, the screaming, the disorientation. He'd been found wandering the hallway covered in soot. Liam was still inside. In the hospital, concussed and confused, they'd given him Liam's wallet found near him in the hallway. They'd mistaken him for Liam. He was a kid from a broken home, with nothing to his name and a bleak future. Liam had everything: loving parents, a bright future, the Harrington Scholarship. In a moment of traumatized, desperate, and cowardly inspiration, he didn't correct them. He let the mistake stand. He took a dead boy's name and his future and walked away from the ashes of his own life. "I was 19, he said, his voice pleading for an understanding I couldn't give. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do. It just happened. And once it happened, there was no going back. Every day I had to keep it going. I had to be Liam." "And his parents?" I asked, thinking of the quiet, sad-eyed woman who wrote that letter. "Eleanor and Robert? They went along with this desecration. They knew," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Not at first. But Eleanor, a mother, knows. She confronted me about a year later. I confessed everything. I was ready for them to turn me in. I wanted them to. I couldn't carry it anymore. So why didn't they?" "Because by then I'd met you," he said, looking at me with an intensity that was agonizing. "I told them about you. Eleanor said her son was gone. Nothing could bring him back. But destroying me would destroy you too. An innocent person. So she made me promise. She made me promise I would spend the rest of my life honoring her son's memory. That I would be a good man. That I would be the man Liam would have become. That I would love you and our family with all my heart. It was my penance." His confession, his reasoning, was meant to reframe his lie as a form of atonement. A twisted act of love. But all I could hear was the staggering selfishness of it. He had used me. He had used my love, my life, as the stage for his redemption. His penance was a comfortable life, a loving wife, 2 beautiful children, all things he had stolen. Your penance? I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet room. You call this a penance? This beautiful house? A successful career? A family? This wasn't a penance, Daniel. This was the grand prize. You didn't honor Liam Vance. You stole his life and everything that should have been his. You let his parents live in a state of suspended grief for 20 years. And you turned me and my children into props in your disgusting play. The rage was a cleansing fire now. It burned away the shock and the sorrow, leaving only a hard, diamond-bright fury. I spent my entire adult life loving a ghost, I said, my voice shaking with the force of my anger. Every memory I have with you is a lie. Every "I love you" was spoken by a man who doesn't even exist. No, he cried, standing up. That's not true. Being Liam Vance was the lie, but loving you was the only real thing in my life. Loving you, loving Maya and Josh, that was me. That was Daniel. Everything I've done every single day has been for you. To be worthy of you. Worthy of me? I spat the words at him. You think this makes you worthy? This colossal, unforgivable deception? Trust is the foundation of love, Daniel. And you built our entire world on a lie. There is no foundation. There is nothing left. The front door opened. Mom? Dad? We're home. Maya's voice, followed by the thud of Josh's backpack hitting the floor, shattered the terrible intimacy of the moment. Daniel and I froze. We looked at each other in sheer panic. The children. They couldn't walk into this. They couldn't see this. In that split second, a silent, frantic agreement passed between us. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, schooling his features into a semblance of neutrality. I turned away, trying to compose myself, my back to the entryway. In the dining room, guys, I called out, my voice high and falsely bright. They came bounding in, full of the energy of youth. Josh's team won their tournament, Maya announced, slinging an arm around her brother's shoulders. I got the final flag capture. Josh beamed, his face flushed with victory. I forced a smile, turning to them. That's amazing, sweetie. I'm so proud of you. Daniel plastered a weak smile on his face. Way to go, champ. But children are perceptive. They are emotional barometers, and the pressure in the room was at a critical level. Maya's smile faded as she looked between us. Is everything okay? She asked, her brow furrowed with the same thoughtful concern her supposed father, so often wore. You guys look weird. Just talking, honey, Daniel said, his voice strained. About boring adult stuff. A leaky pipe. It was a terrible lie, clumsy and transparent. I saw the doubt in Maya's eyes. I couldn't stand there. I couldn't pretend for one more second. I'm not feeling well, I said, moving toward the stairs. I think I'm going to go lie down. I fled. I ran up the stairs, not looking back. I shut our bedroom door and leaned against it, my body trembling as the sobs I had been holding back finally broke free. I slid down the door to the floor, wrapping my arms around myself, and wept. I wept for the man I thought I had married, for the life I thought I had, for the 16 years of love that had just been revealed as a sham. I wept for my children, whose entire identities were a fiction. Downstairs, I could hear the muffled sounds of Daniel trying to deflect the kids' questions, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. The sound of it, the sound of him parenting my children under a false name, was an unbearable torment. What now? The question was a black hole in my mind. What could possibly come next? My marriage was over. I could not stay with a man I didn't know, a man whose entire existence was a lie. The trust was not just broken, it had never existed in the first place. Forgiveness felt like an impossible alien concept. How do you forgive a crime that is still being committed every single day? But the children, a divorce would be devastating enough. But the truth? The truth would shatter them. It would annihilate their sense of self, their security, their past. How could I tell my daughter that the father she adored was an imposter? How could I tell my son that his last name belonged to a dead man? And what about Eleanor and Robert Vance? Did I owe them the justice they had denied themselves for my sake? Did I owe it to the real Liam Vance to expose the man who had stolen his life? Going to the police felt like detonating a bomb in the center of my own family. It would protect me, perhaps, but it would destroy Maya and Josh. The secret was unforgivable, but the truth felt unlivable. I lay on the floor for hours, listening to the sounds of the house. The sound of Daniel making dinner, the forced cheerfulness in his voice as he talked to the kids. The sound of the TV. The sound of a life trying to pretend it wasn't broken. Later, long after the children were in bed, he came to the door. He knocked softly. "Ilara." I didn't answer. "I put some dinner on a plate for you outside the door," he said through the wood. "Please eat something." His voice was thick with unshed tears. He waited for a moment, and then I heard his soft footsteps retreat down the hall. The man I married died in a fire 21 years ago. The man downstairs was a stranger who knew how I took my coffee, who could make my son laugh like no one else, who had held me through sickness and sorrow. A stranger who had loved me in his own broken, fraudulent way for our entire life together. What I had read in that letter had changed everything forever. It had burned my old life to the ground. And now I was standing in the ashes with no map, no compass, and no idea how to take the next step. My husband was a ghost. My home was a crime scene. And I, Ilara, was the sole keeper of a secret that had the power to save or destroy us all. The choice was mine, and I had no idea what to do.